Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our MPC Online Bible Study. My name is Matthew McGlade, the lead and teaching pastor here at Mansfield Pentecostal Church, where every Tuesday night we have a thought to think about, a question to ponder, and a text to study. And as I mentioned every week, if you're not involved in a life group, why not get connected in a life group or start up a life group? And maybe you can use this material as something that you could use to discuss and to learn amongst yourselves. And that way you get much more out of our time together. Now we're continuing our Bible study series teaching titled The Trustworthy Truth. And we're looking at why we can trust the Bible. Why can we put our confidence in the Bible, that it is a reliable document of events that have happened in the past, both the Old and the New Testament, as well as looking at the life of Jesus, why we can trust the New Testament story of Jesus' life and his resurrection. And so far what we've done, we've looked at the historical, as I mentioned, reliability of the Old and the New Testament. We've looked at why we should care to know about Jesus, why actually it is an important message for us to learn about. And that we saw recently that Jesus was a real historical figure who actually lived, and more than that, who actually understood himself to be divine. Like he understood himself to be God. Now, given this, what I want to look at tonight is I want to ask the question, how should we assess Jesus' claims? Because if Jesus really lived, if he's a historical figure, and if he really understood himself to be God in human form, this leaves us with one of three possibilities. Either he was a lunatic, in that he was self-deceived, thinking that he was divine when he was just really a man, flesh and blood like all of us. Or worse still, he knew he wasn't God, but he was trying to deceive other people into believing that he was God in order to get a following, and thus therefore he would be a liar. Or alternatively, if he is not a lunatic or a liar, he would actually be the Lord. He would be God and man, as it were. And in fact, this position is, or this idea is beautifully put by C.S. Lewis when he wrote in his book Mere Christianity, when he said that a man who is merely a man and said the sort of things that Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. And then he presents us with a problem, because Jesus clearly understood himself to be divine. And C.S. Lewis says if Jesus understood himself to be God or in human flesh, he couldn't possibly be a good moral teacher, because what sort of good moral teacher would embrace that view? And so therefore C.S. Lewis presents us not with a dilemma about Jesus' identity, but a trilemma. Either Jesus was and is the Son of God, or else he's insane, or worse, a liar. And then C.S. Lewis then goes on to say, you must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else he was a madman or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool, you can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come with any patronizing nonsense about this his being a great human teacher. He has not left that open to us, nor did he intend to. And so we see that Jesus is a controversial figure. He is a polarizing figure, because he is not leaving us with many options, given that he understood himself to be God. Either he is one of these three options, a lunatic, a liar, or he really is Lord. Now I want to show you tonight why I believe that Christ really is who he understood himself to be, the Son of God, the Lord. And in doing so, the first thing I want to suggest to you is that it is very clear that Jesus is not a lunatic. Although early in his ministry, his family thought that he was out of his mind. Some people, particularly the religious leaders, thought that he was demon-possessed. It is clear from the very life and teaching of Jesus that that description of being out of his mind or demon-possessed does not fit the description of Jesus. He is not seen by any means by his words or behavior, his actions, as someone who is deceived or mentally deranged. Think for a moment of the words of Jesus on his famous message, his famous sermon, the Sermon on the Mount. Words like, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Or do not worry about your life. Or do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Or do not judge, or else you will be judged. You know, right now we are living in an age of an epidemic of mental health issues, mental illness. It's a huge issue in the culture today. And yet, psychologists will tell you that if you want to know what is a prescription to good mental health, read the Sermon on the Mount. Read the Sermon. The importance of not worrying about life, of learning, to cast your cares upon God, and not fretting for the things of this world. It is a wonderful antidote to the mental distress that we experience in our culture and our age today, particularly in issues like anxiety. And so if you want to have the remedy of a whole and perfect mind, read the Sermon on the Mount, follow the teachings of Jesus. And so it's very clear that from even Jesus' teaching, these are not the words of a lunatic, of someone who is mentally unstable. Even beyond the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus' word demonstrates an unparalleled wisdom, even a profound wisdom, which for me demonstrates something of that Christ was more than just a mere man. When he said to his opponents, give to Caesar what is Caesar and to God what is God's, those words are a flash of sheer genius. And and these words show that with such wisdom that there's actually to be a separation of church and state. Can these really be the words of someone who is mentally insane? And I think that what we can say very clearly that Jesus is not a lunatic. But the second thing I think we can assess from Jesus' life is that also that he is not a liar. If Jesus knew that he was not God, and yet he was deliberately leading others astray, what would his motive be? To lie. He didn't gain any worldly benefit. Jesus said that foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. He didn't have a wife, he didn't have children, he didn't have things that were common to what we expect of for life today. Would someone knowingly die on the cross, the most horrendous death ever devised by man, for something that they knew to be a lie? Further, his character is not in keeping with that of a liar. Even those who would not profess to be Christians would say that they admire Jesus' character. It was Billy Connolly who once said, I can't believe in Christianity, but I think Jesus was a wonderful man. When Jesus was spat upon, when he was cursed, when he was flogged and crucified, he didn't respond with cursing, but with forgiveness. There is something irresistibly attractive about the life of Jesus as someone who exemplified unselfishness, but never self-pity, humility, but never weakness, and joy and fun, but never at the expense of someone else. He was a kind person, but never indulgent. He was the person that whom even his enemies had nothing wrong to say about him. Now think about that. There's nothing in this character that not even his enemies could use against him. Obviously they charged him, the religious leaders charged him with blasphemy, and that was their sort of grounds to try and have him put to death. But there was nothing of his character that they could find in him. And so here was a man who was without sin. His friends who even knew him said that he was someone without sin. And so surely this is not the description of a liar, let alone a lunatic. He was not like Reverend Sunny Young Moon of the Unification Church, who claimed to be the Lord of their second event, yet died in 2012. He isn't like Father Divine or the New York minister known as George Baker, who claimed to be God and yet died in 1965. When we look at the life and the teaching of Jesus, we clearly see that he does not fit in that category of David, Koresh, or any of these people who've claimed to be God or the Messiah or divine. But this then leads us with the final alternative that C.S. Lewis presents before us, and that is this, that Jesus is most likely Lord. You see, if his teaching and his character clearly show that he couldn't be a lunatic or a liar, then his works and even his fulfillment of those things that were spoken of him clearly show that he was more than just a mere man. Imagine for a moment going on a party with Jesus. One day, Jesus was at a wedding in a place called Cana in Galilee, and much to the embarrassment of the host, the wine ran out. And so Jesus' mother asked if he could do something about it. And so we know the story, don't we? He turned the water into the wine. So good that the master of the banquet said that this was the best wine that he ever tasted. Imagine going for a picnic with Jesus. Don't need to bring your sandwiches. Just have a little kid bring his packed lunch and there's enough food to go around. Or how about going to a funeral of Jesus? There's a story told where Jesus was passing through a village called Naim, and a mother was following the coffin with her only son. And the Bible says that Jesus was moved with compassion for the mother, and he raised the mother's only son back to life. Jesus brought life where there was death. But it isn't just his works. Jesus lived a life where he fulfilled everything that was spoken of him hundreds of years even before he came into the world. Throughout the Old Testament, there are hundreds of prophecies that are spoken of the future coming Messiah. In fact, up to 300. And these prophecies include the time and place of the birth of the Messiah, events leading up to his death, and even the nature of his death. Now, what is the likelihood of one person in any time in history fulfilling those prophecies that were spoken of the future Messiah? For all intents and purposes, it is zero, okay? But Jesus fulfilled each of those prophecies, and he will fulfill the remaining of them, or the majority of them in his first coming, but he will fulfill the remaining of them in his second return. But all this simply shows is that Christ fulfilled everything that was spoken of him, and that can't be said of any other religious leader. And so I think what we can see very clearly is that the life of Jesus clearly shows us that he was more than just a mere man. His miracles and actually the fulfillment of the things that were spoken of the Messiah in the Old Testament would suggest to us that he really was who he understood himself to be, the Lord. So we clearly established tonight that he is not a lunatic, he is not a liar, he is most likely to be the Lord. However, there is one other event in history that we must look at, which I believe seals the case that Jesus really was who he understood himself to be, the Son of God. And that is his resurrection. And we're going to be looking at that next week. Guys, thanks for listening. I hope you've got something out of that. Hey, listen, I've got a question for us to ponder in our groups. And the question is this. Describe C.S. Lewis's trilemma argument. Okay, so Jesus being a liar, lunatic, or Lord. How would you show that Jesus isn't a liar or a lunatic, but Lord? So describe C.S. Lewis's trilemma argument. How would you show that Jesus isn't a liar or lunatic, but Lord? And the text of study, I'd like you to read Isaiah chapter 53, verses 4 to 5, and 1 Peter 2, verses 24 to 26. And as you read those passages of scripture in your life group, I'd like you to describe what was the purpose of Jesus' life. Guys, thanks for listening tonight. Hope you got something out of that. Hey, listen, have a great rest of the week and hope to see you over the weekend. God bless you all.